On the evening of February 13, 1978, Sydney, Australia, was alive with anticipation. The city buzzed with energy. The Grand Hilton Hotel, located on George Street, was hosting one of the most important events ever held in the country. The Commonwealth heads of government regional meeting, prime ministers, presidents, and diplomats from across the world gathered under one roof to discuss issues of global significance. Security was tighter than usual for a city that, at the time, felt immune to the kinds of terrorist threats seen in Europe or the Middle East. But by the next morning, the illusion of safety would shatter. At 12:40 am on February 13th, a massive explosion tore through the quiet Sydney night. A bomb, hidden inside a garbage bin outside the Hilton Hotel, detonated as municipal workers collected rubbish. The blast was so powerful it ripped through parked cars, shattered hotel windows, and sent shockwaves echoing down George Street. Two garbage collectors, Alec Carter and William Favell, were killed instantly. A police officer, Sergeant Paul Burmistry, died later from his injuries. Several others were injured, including bystanders and fellow officers. Within seconds, the heart of Sydney transformed into a war zone. Twisted metal, shattered glass, and clouds of dust turned the Hilton's once grand entrance into a scene of carnage. This was the first major terrorist attack on Australian soil. And more than 40 years later, the case remains clouded in mystery, conspiracy theories, and unanswered questions. To understand the impact, you must picture Australia in the late 1970s, unlike Europe, which had seen frequent terror campaigns from groups like the II in Ireland, the Red Army faction in Germany, or Palestinian militant groups. Australia was seen as distant, isolated, and safe. Terrorism simply wasn't part of the national psyche. The Commonwealth meeting at the Hilton was supposed to be a demonstration of Australia's role on the world stage. Leaders like India's Morarji Desai, Malaysia's Hussein Onn, and Fiji's Ratu Serkamesis Murad were in attendance, with Australia's Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser hosting. For intelligence services, the event was unprecedented. But according to many later reports, security was haphazard. Garbage bins weren't cleared beforehand. There was no screening of vehicles around the hotel. And although hundreds of police were stationed nearby, most were inexperienced with large-scale counter-terrorism measures. So when the bomb exploded, it was both shocking and humiliating for Australian authorities. Police and bomb squads descended on George Street. The damage was catastrophic. The garbage truck itself was torn apart. Windows from the hotel and nearby buildings blown inward. Panic spread as rumors of additional bombs circulated. The hotel was locked down, and world leaders were rushed to safety. Investigators quickly realized the device had been planted in a street-side garbage bin. At that time, such bins were simple steel containers, easy to access, and placed just meters from the heavily guarded hotel entrance. But the bigger question was who would want to attack the Hilton. Australia wasn't at war. It had no known enemies capable of launching such an attack. Yet some whispers began to circulate almost immediately. Perhaps this wasn't foreign terrorism at all, but something closer to home. Theories emerged in the days that followed. 1. Anarchist or left-wing radicals. The late 1970s saw small but vocal radical groups in Australia protesting against capitalism, imperialism, and nuclear policies. Could they have escalated to bombing? 2. Foreign militants, some suspected Sikh separatists, who were politically active in India and had been staging international protests. Since India's Prime Minister was attending, this became a favored theory. 3. An inside job. Whispers began almost immediately that the bombing may have been staged, or at least allowed to happen, to justify tougher security laws and expanded powers for the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation ASIO. This was a theory that would haunt the case for decades. Despite the theories, investigators had little physical evidence. The bomb had obliterated itself, the garbage truck, and much of the surrounding area. Leads were scarce, and the political pressure was immense. By the 1980s, suspicion turned toward a little-known group in Australia, the Ananda Marga, a spiritual sect from India with controversial TIs. Founded by Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar, the group mixed yoga and meditation with radical politics. Authorities viewed them with suspicion, seeing them as potentially violent extremists. In 1978, just months after the Hilton bombing, 3 Ananda Marga members Tim Anderson, Ross Dunn, and Paul Alistair were arrested and accused of plotting to bomb the home of Indian diplomat Sir Arthur Tange. The men were later convicted, but as the Hilton investigation stalled, Police and intelligence agencies began to link the sect to the hotel bombing as well. For years, the Anand and Marga connection was treated as the most likely theory, but it was never proven. In fact, some journalists later suggested the group was used as a convenient scapegoat. The Hilton bombing became one of the most investigated crimes in Australian history. Multiple royal commissions were launched not only into the bombing itself, but into the intelligence services handling of the case. What these commissions revealed only deepened the mystery. Testimony suggested that ASIO may have received intelligence warnings about the possibility of an attack, but did not act decisively. Even more controversially, some witnesses claimed the bomb may have been planted by security forces themselves, either by accident during a training exercise or deliberately to justify stronger laws. These theories are sometimes referred to as the false flag hypothesis of the Hilton bombing. Though never proven, they remain central to the public's fascination with the case. In 1989, more than a decade after the bombing, Anand and Marga member Tim Anderson was suddenly arrested and charged with planting the Hilton bomb. The conviction shocked many. The evidence was largely circumstantial, based heavily on testimony from informants with questionable credibility. Anderson was found guilty and sentenced to prison. But in 1991, after years of appeal, his conviction was overturned. Judges ruled that the case against him was unsafe, relying on unreliable witnesses and lacking hard evidence. Anderson was freed, and the Hilton bombing returned to the status of an unsolved crime. For Australians, the Hilton bombing left scars. It was the first time terrorism had reached their doorstep, shattering the assumption that distance and isolation offered protection. It also reshaped law enforcement. Counter-terrorism units were strengthened, intelligence agencies given more power, and Sydney forever marked as the site of Australia's first terror attack. But the unanswered questions still echo. Was it a genuine act of terrorism targeting world leaders? A sect like Anand and Marga lashing out? Or was it, as some suggest, a botched or deliberate operation by intelligence services themselves? The Hilton Hotel bombing remains one of Australia's darkest and most controversial unsolved cases. 3 innocent men died that night, dozens were injured, and to this day, no one has been definitively held responsible. The questions it left behind about terrorism, government power, and truth still haunt the nation. Was the Hilton bombing an act of political violence, a cult-driven crime, or a shadowy manipulation from within the very agencies sworn to protect? Perhaps we will never know. Thank you for watching Crimes Through Time. If this story gripped you, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into history's darkest mysteries. And tell us in the comments, do you believe the Hilton bombing was carried out by extremists? Or was it an inside job covered up at the highest levels? We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay curious and stay safe.